Hello viewers, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be looking at a tool called Gitea. So Gitea is a self-hosted Git service. You can use that for if you want to do some local development, and if you don't want to use GitHub, then it's a self-hosted Git service which looks very similar to GitHub. So that's what we will be looking at in this video. And let me open up my browser and go to Gitea to look at the documentation on how to install or how to run Gitea. So that's Gitea, gitea.io. It's a painless self-hosted Git service, and then let's look at the docs on how to install it. So there are a few ways that you can install Gitea on your system. You can install it comes as a package for different distributions. If you're on Ubuntu or Arch Linux, or there are RPM based packages as well. You can install them, you can run it as a service, as a systemd service, or you can just download the binary, Gitea binary, and run it, or you can build it from source. You can also run it on a Windows machine, but the easiest option for me is to use a Docker. So let's do that with Docker, and they've given us some Docker compose files that we can use. It's always good practice to use Docker compose file, so you don't have to remember the Docker commands, Docker run commands to do this. So it's better to save this as a Docker compose file. So I'm going to go with the first one here. Let's copy that and go to the terminal, cd to play directory. I'm going to make a directory called Gitea, cd to Gitea, and vi docker compose.yaml file. Okay, and paste that. Let me turn the syntaxing off. Okay, cool. So network, it's creating a different network, Docker network called Gitea. That's okay. Services, we've got one service. The thing to remember is Gitea works with a variety of, it needs a backend to store the configurations, metadata, and all those things. So Postgres is supported, MySQL is supported, and Microsoft SQL Server is also supported. The easiest option is to use SQLite file-based database. Okay, so image is Gitea, and we're using the latest version. If you want to pin to a specific version, you can use the specific version. And environment user ID, so it will run inside the container as the user ID 1000. So if I show my ID, so my ID is 1000, so inside the container it will run as my user ID, so it will have access to any directories that I will be mounting in the Docker compose file. Okay, so Docker compose and restart always, and we're using the Gitea network which we've defined here. Volumes, so one thing that I'm going to change is, instead of using, so here as of now it's using a local directory in the directory where I'm actually running. So I'm in home Venkaten play Gitea, and if I create a directory here, make dir Gitea, and that will be used for persistence, but I don't want to use a local directory. I want to use a Docker volume. So I'm going to change this to a Docker volume. So I'm going to remove the / in front of Gitea. So that will be my Docker volume. You can name it whatever you want, Gitea _ data or something. And we are mounting a couple of files from our host system as read-only for time zone thing. And ports, so Gitea runs on port 3000. I want to map the container port 3000 to my host port 3000, and the container will be running an SSH server. So if you're used to GitHub, then you can if you want to push or pull from a private repository, you can use Git credentials. You can add your public SSH key, and then you'll be able to pull or push a private repository. So you don't have to type in your username and password every time you do a pull or a push to a private repository. So for that, the container has also got an SSH server running on port 22. I'm going to map that to port 2222 on my host machine. Alright, so those are the only changes that I'm doing. I'm changing the normal directory to a Docker volume, and then I'm changing the port from, for some reason the documentation has 222. I would like to expose it as 2222 on my host machine. Okay, so that's the Docker compose file. Let's save that, and we can do Docker compose up. Named volume Gitea data is I forgot to define the volume. Okay, so we are using a Docker volume, but we haven't defined any volume. So go to the end of the file and define the volume here. Volumes Gitea, it's an empty directory. Okay, so now if I do docker compose up -d, named volume Gitea data, come on, I've defined it. The name that I've used is wrong, so it should be Gitea underscore data, because that's what I've used here, Gitea underscore data. So hopefully this time it should work. Docker compose up -d. Cool, creating the Gitea network, creating the volume Gitea underscore data, and if I do docker volume ls, so that's the docker volume, docker compose logs. Cool, so that's the log for our server and it's running on port 3000, so we should be able to access Gitea from our browser. Okay, let's do that. Localhost colon 3000. Okay, cool. So that's our Gitea instance, and we need to configure. We need to do a bit of configuration before we can start using Gitea. And you can click on any of these links here, like explore, register, or sign in. It knows that the Gitea hasn't been configured. It is running for the first time, so it will redirect you to the installation wizard. So if I click on register or sign in or explore or any URL here, it will take you to the initial configuration page. Okay, so database type, as I mentioned, it supports MySQL, PostgreSQL, Microsoft SQL, and SQLite. So I'm going to be using SQLite, but if you want, you can use MySQL or Postgres. If you've got an existing MySQL or Postgres database, you can hook that into this Gitea instance. Or you can update your Docker Compose file to start a MySQL container or a Postgres container. So I want to keep everything in the Gitea service itself. So I'm going to be using SQLite. And the path for the database is /data gitea.db, which is inside the container. Site title, whatever you want. Let's call it Gitea just me. Repository root path, so that's the place, that's the directory inside the container where all your repositories will be stored. Run as username git and SSH server domain. So this one, instead of localhost, I'm going to change it to the IP address of my host machine. So my host machine has an IP address 192.168.1.81, 192.168.1.81, and the SSH server port, because we have mapped the container port 22 to 2222 on my host machine, I'm going to update this one as well. So any other virtual machines that I'm going to be using on my host machine will be able to use this Gitea instance on port 2222. If you want to change the listener port for the web UI, you can change it. And again, the base URL, I'm going to change it to my host machine's IP address, 192.168.1.81. Log path, everything is okay. If you want email settings, I'm not running any SMTP server on my host machine, so I'm not going to configure that. Administrator account settings, if you want, you can create your first user here. But anyways, it will ask you to create a register for a new user for the first time when you log in. So the first user that you create will be the admin user. Install Gitea. Okay, so that's it. So now it's asking us to sign in to Gitea. Because we haven't got any user account created, we need to register a new account. Okay, username Venkat N, email address venkaten@gmail.com, password, type in to confirm the password, register account. Okay, cool. So that's our GitHub, self-hosted GitHub kind of service run by Gitea. All right, let's explore a few things here. It looks very similar to GitHub. And we can go ahead and update our profile if we want. Change your avatar. Okay. Full name, Venkat Nagapan. Email address. Okay, those are looking good. If I want to change the avatar, I can do that. Choose a file. Let's say I want to use that one. Open. Update avatar. Nope. Update avatar. Changes that you made may leave site. Okay. All right, cool. So my avatar has been changed now, and account. If you want to change the password or if you want to add additional email address, you can do that. And if you want to delete your account, you can delete here, and you can choose which theme you want. There are a couple of themes here. Arc green update theme, but I don't fancy this dark theme, especially when recording this video. So I'm going to go with the default theme. Gitea. Security, if you want to enable multi-factor, two-factor authentication, you can enable it here. SSH GPG key, so this is what I was talking about. You can add your public SSH public key so that you can do pull and push commands without having to type in your username and password. If you're using the HTTPS URL for your git clone command or git push command, then you will have to type in your username and password. But you can also add your SSH keys so that you can use SSH credentials to connect to your GitHub, Gitea. Okay, so while we are here, we can add our SSH key. Add key name my local SSH key. You have to paste in your public key, the content of your public key in this box here. Okay, cat. So that's my public key, which I'm going to copy and paste it here. Add key. Okay, so I've got my key added, and I should be able to git pull or git push any private repository using this key without having to type in my username and password. Okay, organization, if you want to create organizations, you can. Repositories, I don't have any repositories at the moment. Okay, dashboard. Let's create our first repository. Okay, repository name, let's call it hello world. Make repository private. Okay, I just want to show you how to use the SSH key. So I'm going to make this repository private. Okay, initialize the repository, create the repository. Okay, cool. So that's our repository. We have one branch, which is the master branch, and there's only one commit, initial commit, the readme file that we just committed. Okay, cool. And now we should be able to check out or clone this repository, do some changes, push it, and we can do all sorts of things. Okay, let's first clone this repository. So that's the URL for SSH, and you can see here, because we configured during the initial configuration, we specified the IP address of our host machine and the SSH port to be 2222. It gets reflected here. And if you want to use HTTP, you can do that. So that's the HTTP URL. And I'm going to use the SSH URL, copy, and let's clone this repository. Git clone. So that's SSH. It's a private repository. It shouldn't be asking us for our password. But before that, let me show you. If we use our HTTP URL, copy, git clone. Cool. So because it's a private repository, it's asking us for the username and password. We can type in our username and password. Cool. So now we have our hello world checked out. We have just one file readme, and I'm going to delete the repository, and I'm going to show you how to clone using the SSH URL. Because we have added our public key, it shouldn't ask us for the username and password. So now git clone, and we are using the SSH URL. And now it shouldn't ask you for the password. Okay, I've used this key before, that's why it's showing you that error, but you've got your repository checked out. Hello world, we've got that. cd to hello world, and I can create a new file, touch dummy file, git add git commit -m, added a new file. Okay, git push. Cool, that's pushed. I'll have to clear my SSH host key. Let me do that now. Set -i, which line is it? So the offending key is line number 1. So let's delete that line from our known host. Okay, cool. Let's add another file. Touch second file, git add git commit, added another file. Okay, git push. Cool. So we don't get that error anymore. That was from my previous testing. Cool. So that's their git log. So we have 3 commits. The initial commit we made from the Gitea web interface, and then these 2 commits we just made. And if we go here, refresh this page, we've got 3 commits now. So 3 commits from me, and we can also edit the files from here. So if I go to my repository, and let's say if we want to just edit a simple single file, dummy file, going to edit that file. This is just a dummy file. Okay, so either you can commit this directly to the master branch, or you can create a new branch and then do a pull request. Okay, so that's the branch that will be created. No problem. If you want to change the name of the branch, you can change that. Propose file change. Okay, new pull request, and then create pull request. Cool. So we have 1 pull request now, code, and we have 1 pull request. And if I click on that request, I can verify what has been changed and look at the commit. So that's the commit, update dummy file, files changed. So that's the file that was changed, dummy file, and we've added 1 line to that. Okay, everything looks good, and I'm going to merge the pull request. I'm going to add a comment saying looks good, merge pull request, and it also gives you an option to delete the branch that we created. Yes, delete the branch. We don't need that branch anymore. We've merged the branch to the master branch. So now if I go to hello world, and you can see there are 5 commits, and if I look at the dummy file here, it has got that line. This is just a dummy file. Okay, so this is just the basic GitHub operation. If you're used to like creating branches, creating pull requests, and so on, it looks very similar. It works very similar to GitHub. It's a self-hosted service. If you want to do some local development, and if you don't want to use the GitHub account, you can do that. We can also add webhooks, collaborators. If you want to add additional users to this project, to this repository, you can do that. We've got webhooks, git hooks, releases, and everything, issues. If you want to create a new issue, you can. So it looks very similar, but it's a self-hosted. You're not connecting to the GitHub account. You are connecting to your local account here. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to show you is if I delete my public SSH key, go to my profile, nope, settings, and let's say I will delete my SSH key that I added. Yes, so there are no SSH keys. And now if I do touch another file, git add git commit -m, new file, git push. Cool. So it won't work because we've deleted our key, and our private key, my private key in this machine, doesn't have access to the GitHub repository. Cool. That's all I wanted to show you, and hope you like this video. Please share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you've got any questions in this, please let me know, and I'll be happy to help you. I will see you all in my next video. Bye bye.